Well, welcome everybody. Great to be back, and we're talking next with a great friend of ours, someone who's been a great resource for our Phyllis Schlafly Eagles in general, Congressman Jim Banks. He represents Indiana's 3rd Congressional District. It's a funny twist of kind of fate that he was, I think as it was, I'll ask him, office mates with one of our board members. Our board member is Scott Schneider from Indiana, and they were office mates in the legislature, which is, I was reminded of that, Congressman, because I'm going to ask you a question. One of the students submitted about the difference between serving in the state legislature and the U.S. Congress. But Congressman Jim Banks, you may have seen him in the last year or two. He's really cut a big profile as someone who speaks especially about China and the question of what's happening with America's relation with the communist regime. I mentioned he served in the Indiana state and the Indiana, there's my phone, by the way. It's got a funny ringer. Sorry about that. And the Indiana State Senate. He also is a veteran and served in the military and has that perspective, which has been very valuable. So welcome, Congressman Banks. Thanks for coming on with us.
Thank you very much. It's great to be with you. It's an honor to be a part of your 27th conference, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you today.
Well, thank you. And you know, we have this is a virtual one. So many things are different, and so our students are watching virtually and then commenting and asking questions. I did get a question before we were getting ready to do this, and it was one of the students said to me, "I wonder what the difference is between serving in the Congress and serving in the state legislature broadly." But first, maybe you can tell a story about Scott Schneider that can expose him or something. But yeah, what is that? What's the difference been like for you? You've been up in the U.S. House for a couple of years now. I know you're in the Republican Study Committee. You play an active role of kind of a leadership of the conservatives. So, but what's the difference been in serving in those two bodies?
Well, really, Ed, it's been night and day. I served in the Indiana State Senate for 6 years, minus one when I deployed to Afghanistan. We can talk about that in a little bit. My wife, coincidentally, was elected to take my place as a state senator. And then I got elected to Congress. I've been in Washington for 4 years, serving in Congress. And the biggest difference is serving in a body of 50 versus a body of 435. So what I found serving in the state Senate is, the processes are very different too. But I found being in a body of 50, you're far more relevant. You can use the process in a different way to make yourself more relevant. When you're in a body of 435, you really have to work with other members. It's all about the collective, about gathering together with coalitions to get something done. And that's why, as a conservative, in a body of 435, you got to bond together with conservatives and use a collective force rather than an individual force to be productive. And that's the biggest difference. But also at the state level, a senior state senator once told me this, and I didn't fully appreciate it until I got to Congress, but at the state level, you really work on issues every day that directly impact people. I mean, what we might call kitchen table issues.
Right.
When you go to Washington, you're dealing with issues largely monetarily, largely about funding and appropriations, that we don't really impact us on a day-to-day basis like you do at the state level. That's the way our founders designed government to be, though. Government closest to the people is the most effective government, and that's what I miss about the state level.
Right.
We have a battle going on in our country today. I'm not trying to dismiss what I do at the federal level, because the battle that we're facing in Washington, D.C. for the future of our country is something that I feel called to be a part of. But really, to get back to my initial point, the difference is really night and day.
We're talking with Congressman Jim Banks, and Congressman, you mentioned one aspect of your biography that I wanted to follow up on and relate it to this presidency, and maybe you can broaden it out as you see. But I know you served in our military. You mentioned you deployed overseas. When this president ran, he ran on this sort of notion of America first, and he talked about ending the wars. You know, on the other hand, he also carefully and often talks about his support for the VA and veterans. You know, in other words, he thinks respect for the military means making clear what the mission is and then getting us home, not dragging on. He even went so far as to speak somewhat dramatically about what Eisenhower would have called the military-industrial complex, where the sort of the ability to fight a war and the surrounding economic benefits start to become somewhat seductive. How did talk about a little bit, if you don't mind, about your serving in the military? You know, you were not a kid. You weren't right out of college when you went in the military. When you were going overseas, you had already sort of mid-career. And then what you think about the president, how how he's been leading on this, and how young people are looking up, and our young people that are on here, a lot of college kids, they were born in 2000 and 1998. They don't even remember how the war on terror began. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was in Afghanistan not that long ago. I served there in 2014 and 15.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about the period of time that I was there, it was Obama was president toward the end of his time in office, and he had politicized the war in Afghanistan and Iraq so much, sort of abruptly pulling us out in an irresponsible way, especially in Iraq. That's what led to the rise of ISIS. By the way, President Trump doesn't get enough credit. He took office and said we're going to defeat ISIS, and he did it after the Obama policies over the 8 years that he was in office led to ISIS actually being created and rising up and filling a void or a vacuum in places like Iraq. But Obama promised to end the war in Afghanistan, and I was there during the period of time when he ended the war by name, but things only got worse as Obama was leaving office, and that's the mess that President Trump inherited. And it's a shame that the debate on foreign policy was canceled, that the Presidential Debate Commission really flubbed and messed up in a way that it was canceled, because this is an area where I believe President Trump has the greatest story to tell. He's going to leave his first term. I'm hoping and praying there will be a second term, but after his first term in office, the world is a far safer place than what it was 4 years ago when Barack Obama left office. The number of deaths in Afghanistan of American troops has sharply diminished. We're in a safer situation with North Korea. When President Trump became president, and I was a brand new member of Congress serving on the Armed Services Committee, we were talking about an imminent war with North Korea. That's not the case today. Right. The temperature has cooled in that part of the world. What he's done in building a far stronger relationship with our greatest ally in Israel by doing what every president in my life promised to do but didn't, and President Trump actually delivered on his promise and moved the embassy to Jerusalem, and building that relationship, that fundamental relationship that we have with Israel in a way that no other president has done in modern times, is a victory in and of itself. Then negotiating peace deals in the Middle East that everyone said at the outset of his administration that he would never be able to do, and he did it, and there are more peace deals to come, I believe, even before the end of the year. I mean, this president's track record when it comes to foreign policy, especially when it comes to places like Iraq and Afghanistan, and getting our troops out of harm's way is something that he will never get enough credit for. History books are going to look back and give him a lot more credit than he's getting in the moment for what he's accomplished in that regard. So ending endless wars is a platform that this president ran on, and it's a platform that he's sought so much every single day to deliver on. And I can tell you, when it comes to Afghanistan, where I was just 5 years ago from this point, it's in a much better position than it was when President Trump inherited it. In fact, just one last note on that, Ed, for the first time ever since 2001, when we went into Afghanistan, you have the Taliban negotiating with the Afghan government. That's never happened before. They've actually come together because President Trump has created a situation where they can come together to negotiate a peace deal and try to bring us to a situation where we can get our troops out of Afghanistan. That's a big win for this president. It shows what kind of leader he is, and I'm very proud of him for it.
We're talking with Congressman Jim Banks, everybody, and Congressman Banks is the 3rd Congressional District, Indiana. And Congressman, I want to make sure I don't miss the two sort of questions or threads that I've weaved through all this Collegians Summit, Phyllis Schlafly Collegians Summit, for our college age, and sometimes we have some younger Eagles that are watching that are in high school and others that are watching. But so the two questions I've been asking everyone, one is, what do you tell young college students in terms of their future, what they should be looking at, what the possibilities are? And the second question, which I can preview and I'll tie it in, I hope, to your one of your real where you've led is on China. And the question, a lot of our young people tell us they're being taught that socialism and market capitalism, the American market, capitalism and socialism, well, they're both interesting systems. What could work? And we've been talking about, hey, do you understand what socialism does in practice, what it does when you have a socialism in the world? But this first question, young people, and I'll tie this even Indiana, Notre Dame's got a ton of attention because of Amy Coney Barrett, Judge Barrett, as the nominations going forward. It's extraordinary to see. You know, you've got Indiana's got this tradition. Former Governor Mitch Daniels is one of the leaders in the country on education, online education at Purdue University. It's been really interesting to watch that change. So young people are looking up at Indiana's. Mike Pence, of course, is the vice president. Such a great debate a few weeks ago. But what do you tell young people about the future? College students, where they are, what's coming, and some of the your advice to them?
Yeah, I'm Ed. I'm probably like you because you work daily with these students. I'm as hopeful as ever about the next generation that's going to take the helm and lead our conservative movement forward. When I meet young people all over the country who are getting involved, it reminds me of me. I mean, I got involved in the political process as a college student. I'm the son of a factory worker. My mom was a cook at a nursing home.
Wow.
Politics was a 4-letter word in our house. And it's not what my mom and dad dreamed of one day, their oldest son growing up to be a politician. In fact, my dad was a hardcore union leader in the factory that he worked in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And my earliest memories of politics are two things: listening to Rush Limbaugh in the car in the early 90s, and also my dad was really hot for Ross Perot because he hated the Bushes, and NAFTA as well was a 4-letter word in our house. So the first time my dad has been excited about politics again is when Donald Trump came down the escalator, and he was for him. From that point forward, I thought he was crazy. But Donald Trump brought out those emotions for my dad, the same emotions that Ross Perot did back in 1992. Yeah. Why? Because my dad's a blue collar, working class, middle income person that never considered himself to be Republican or Democrat. Probably his family upbringing was more Democrat. My grandpa was a Democrat, right. But Donald Trump that brought these issues back to life, putting the American worker first and negotiating trade deals, especially when it comes to China, that puts the American worker first and preserves middle income, middle class, blue collar jobs for people like him. And that's why he was fired up for Donald Trump from the outset. And that's what makes President Trump so unique, is that he's the first president that's departed from the failed policies and the failed conventional wisdom of the past that said China is a threat to the United States of America and we're going to do something about it, both economically and militarily. And I'll get back into that in a moment.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
as we talk to college students and high school students, I mean, my message to all of you is step up and get involved. And as you think about your future, think about working in a position where you can serve and give back. That doesn't mean that, I have my MBA and I worked in business before I got elected for a little bit too. But there are ways that all of us can serve and get involved and build the conservative movement and preserve the virtues and values that make America the greatest country in the world. My mom and dad's idea of the American dream, when we were kids growing up in a trailer park, was to step up and give my two brothers and I an opportunity to have a better lifestyle, a better life than what they had. I was the first in my family to go to college and live that out. That was my mom and dad's American dream. My American dream is the same, that my three daughters can grow up in a country where they have a better opportunity in front of them than what I had. But that American dream is at risk more than ever before, and it's because of the authoritarian regime of China, the Chinese Communist Party, whose 100-year mission is to not just dominate the world, but especially to dominate the United States of America, to become the hegemonic superpower of the world. They want to dominate us. They want to do to us what they've done to Hong Kong, what they've sought to do to Taiwan, to other countries in their region. They want to do that to us and take away the choices and the democratic values that make our country so strong. And so far, Ed, I hate to say it, but sadly, they're succeeding because they've integrated their culture, they've integrated their economy so much with the United States of America's economy that they've been able to bend us to their will. And they've forced, when you hear Mark Cuban, who, by the way, went to Indiana University, I've always loved Mark Cuban, from watching him on TV to owning an NBA team to watching his, this is a guy who's lived the American dream himself, built up a business and sold it, made a lot of money. But he did an interview last week that was revealing, where he said where he was talking about why don't you speak out against the human rights abuses in China versus the Uyghur Muslim population.
Yep.
He said, I'm just not willing to go there. And why is he not willing to go there? Because the MBA is so dependent on the Chinese market that he's not willing to speak out against human rights abuses. And that's a darn shame in this country. That you have a leader like Mark Cuban who's not willing to tell the truth and speak out, but he can't speak out because the bottom line, the almighty dollar, speaks louder to him than speaking out against the biggest threat that we face in America, which is China and the human rights abuses that China exposes against their own people. And that's what's at risk. That's why the next generation, the generation of young people that are part of this conference today, need to be focused on preserving America's values and virtues, and that means a conflict. Economically especially, and hopefully never militarily, but a conflict with China that's going to play out for the generation to come.
Well, let me say a couple of things. First of all, I didn't know you had two brothers. So there's three boys, you and your dad against your mom, the dynamic. Now you got your wife, who's not an insignificant, smart lady, and three daughters. Man, you're outnumbered, brother. We'll start praying for you, all those women, but I won't focus on that. Let me pick up on one thing, and we just got a few minutes left on this. We're talking with Congressman Jim Banks, and I'll put up on social media, everybody, all of his different stuff. He's got a bunch of bills he's filed. You'll be interested. But I want to back this up for a second. You mentioned Mark Cuban. If you look at the communist Chinese, what they have, I tell people this, what socialism ends up doing is managing the economy so that what young people need to realize is America's opportunity, whether it's the patent system, the rule of law, that anybody's got a chance, whether you're Congressman Jim Banks and you're first one in your family to go to college, or you're, I don't know, pick somebody who went to one of the big schools and is, one of the elite folks that goes to the top places, maybe has lots of wealth. Anybody in America can make it because our system doesn't mean everybody can, by the way. Sometimes you got more connections and all, but the possibility is there. Socialism takes control of your life and takes away those options. And we just have about 2 minutes left, Congressman Banks. I guess, when you think of socialism and the communist regime contrasted to American exceptionalism, kind of finish on why that's so important, please.
Yeah, it's important because if we choose that path for our country, for the future of America, it will take away the ability of our country to preserve what I'm talking about, that American dream, to grow up and be able to look back and say, I'm going to do better than my parents' generation did, through your hard work, ingenuity, and ambition. It takes that all off the table, Ed. I mean, that's why my generation, the younger generation, as part of this conference, we have to fight to preserve it, and it means a trade war with China. It means building up our military, which in a way that has been diminished by the Obama Biden administration, that makes it less competitive and less scary to the Chinese. They've built their military up with capabilities that surpass ours. So we have to turn our attention and focus to that. It is the threat, that the greatest threat that we face in America today is the Chinese Communist Party, and we have to rebuild our country's attention to focus on that threat, because this is a war that we can't afford to lose.
Well, thank you, Congressman Jim Banks. And let me just say, for those of you, often you heard me say on this Collegian Summit, the phrase "drain the swamp." And if you want to drain the swamp, you got to send guys like Congressman Banks up to Washington. He's not here for the action. He's here to make a difference. And we appreciate it very much, Congressman. Thank you for taking the time, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you. Honored to be with you.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, Congressman Banks. We got a lot more that's going on. We will be back.